Hi, I'm Jennifer Potter, Executive Director of Be Well Texas. Too many people are struggling alone these days, and alcohol and drug deaths are increasing. We started Be Well Texas to offer high-quality, science-based addiction treatment and recovery services anywhere, even at home. We provide compassionate, caring support virtually or in person. In many cases, there is no cost for treatment if you don't have insurance. Really. Welcome to Be Well Texas. We're glad you're here.
I want to talk about something that's been really exciting around here, and that is our partnership with our friends at Ford. Ford Motor Company and your North Texas Ford, or your Texas Ford dealers have announced an expanded sponsorship of the UIL State Championships, solidifying Ford as the official automotive sponsor of the UIL. As part of the new commitment, Ford will now support all UIL extracurricular activities, including athletic, academic, and music state championship competitions. In addition to the sponsorship, Ford is celebrating the 20th anniversary of the prestigious Built Ford Tough Player of the Week Award and Player of the Year Award. This campaign has become one of the most celebrated in Texas high school sports, recognizing standout athletes, student athletes, for their on-field performance, leadership, and commitment to excellence. Ford will honor some of the most decorated players who have received the award over the years, with a special focus being on their achievements both in high school and beyond. Guys like Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, all former Built Ford Tough Players of the Year, and we're partnering with them to amplify that. Dave Campbell's Texas Football, we're going to be amplifying the celebration through our partnership through all of our different platforms, so Texan Live, as well as here on this program and over the course of our social media as well, and TexasFootball.com. We're really, really excited to be partnering with Ford to help celebrate all of the things in Texas high school sports across the landscape. So more to come on that. There's more information on TexasFootball.com, but we're so thrilled to announce that partnership in Texas and the Texas Ford Dealers' expanded partnership as the official automotive sponsor of partner of the UIL State Championships. We certainly are very, very excited about the future there.
Hello and welcome into a special edition of the Dave Campbell's College Football Podcast. I am here with senior writer Mike Craven, and joining us is Billy Embody with ontheponyexpress.com. Billy, we're going to dive into SMU for the 2025 season. Let me start off, and I'm going to put on my hater hat for a second here. And I'm not saying I think like this, but I'm saying there are people who do think like this. SMU was a one-hit wonder last year, flash in the pan. It won't happen again. What do you say to that?
Carter, isn't SMU number one in wins over the last 2 years in the state of Texas? Maybe three?
I didn't say I said that. I said people are thinking that.
Right? No, I know. So, no, there's going to be a lot of people that think it was a perfect storm, flash in the pan, type of thing. But you guys are here in the state and you see kind of what this staff is building from just even their procedures on how they go about doing things and fixing problems. SMU loses that incredible defensive line off of last year's team. Everybody knows that's a problem. They went out and got multiple transfers all over the defensive line, and they did it in a way that I think is going to be the biggest storyline definitely of this defense this year. And that's, they didn't get a Tank Booker in the transfer portal. They actually kind of changed their approach because of the market and what a defensive tackle or a defensive end is commanding in this NIL world. And they went out and they got a lot of group of five flavor, guys who had started, guys who had played a lot of meaningful snaps for their teams, but they didn't get the Jonathan Jefferson from Georgia, Elijah Roberts from Miami, Jafari Harvey from Miami, Mike Lockhart from West Virginia. It's Terry Webb from Texas State. It's Kevontae Spears from Memphis. It's Jeffrey Embaugh from Purdue, who was on one of the worst defenses in college football. There's a lot of different pieces and differing approaches for how they're fixing things. But overall, they know what to spend their time and in today's day and age of college football, their money on. And that is in the trenches. And that's something SMU has stayed committed to what seems like a pretty high level. Like I think their offensive line is going to be better than last year, and they opened up a lot of holes for Brashard Smith to, look the way he did. But they think they're going to be better up front this year, and they do have a lot of questions in the run game. Who takes over that spot? Who is it by committee? But Rhett Lashley and his staff, and I was actually talking with one of the, I talked to a bunch of coaches this week for some things, but the strength coach, Sean Griswold, I mean, he just was like, dude, we get to work for this guy who just gets it on so many levels. He gets it from a personnel perspective. He gets it from a culture perspective. He's a great play caller. He understands how important it is that Scott Simons is here as defensive coordinator. He allows me to do my thing. The culture and stability in this program right now, and I think they're one of a handful of programs with 3 years or more of having the same staff with regards to head coach, defensive, offensive coordinator, strength coach. That means something in today's world. I mean, these players are, you almost worry, are they too comfortable in this great culture that they've got going on at SMU? But they're in really good shape right now as a program, and I think that will allow them to not be a one-hit wonder. And, oh, by the way, you've got Kevin Jennings coming back too.
This as a beat writer, you're kind of at the mercy of how cool the coach is, and covering SMU is pretty easy right now because Lashley absolutely gets it. You're the perfect person for me to ask this question to. I'm working on a story right now about SMU transitioning from a very portal-heavy recruiting situation or strategy to like, oh, now we can go get these high school guys. We don't have to wait for them to be in the portal. From your vantage point as somebody who's into the recruiting, kind of how have you seen that shift? How much different are the players they can land now compared to what they could land 5 years ago when this thing started to turn around?
Well, in May and into early June too, it was like a weekly occurrence watching Oklahoma fan sides melt down over losing another recruiting battle with SMU. I think it was 4 direct head-to-head recruiting battles over that span that OU had lost to SMU. It's Aljor Miles, is Deuce Gilbert, Papunga Katoa. There's a couple others maybe in there. So that is the world that SMU's playing in. They're having to fend off Michigan for one of their commits who ends up visiting there. It's kind of a parting of ways. I don't know when this is coming out, but Markel Dabney, is kind of the opposite of that. You beat Michigan for a kid, and you're also playing in this big boy space where these bigger programs don't give up. Neither does SMU. They've flipped and have flipped targets in and have hosted them as well. But they're just playing in this new weight class when it comes to high school recruiting, like you've talked about. And it is a space where they're being successful. I mean, they flipped Ja'Kai Anderson, a 4-star wide receiver from LSU, a kid that LSU in the old days would have never let walk out of Louisiana. Mm-hmm. But SMU's got a pitch that appealed to him, and they couldn't overcome that. And that's the new reality that SMU has right now going on, is that they have something that's really attractive and also something that's really different compared to some of these other programs that are, generally recruiting consistently in the top 20, top 15, top 10. SMU's kind of new kid on the block in that sense, but they're also a staff that has been around the block in some big recruiting battles. They know what a prospect should look like at this level. Like, you look at Aljor Miles, I mean, he's like made out of a lab. And those are the type of players that they want to be recruiting. And if they end up getting through this summer, and, signing day is still a long way away, but particularly this summer, and they don't end up getting who they think they should be getting, then they say, okay, well, we've got more spots in the portal, or we could take a bigger 27 class. Those are the different conversations. They're not going to be in this space where they're going to be signing 25 to 30 kids and half of them are flyers. They're just not going to do that anymore. And that was a big change. As soon as they got into the ACC a full year before they played in the ACC, they immediately stopped on, probably a dozen prospects that they probably could have gotten and loaded up in the high school ranks. That 24 class ended up being portal heavy to get ready for the ACC. It worked out. And this coming 25 group that just got to campus was a large high school group and the best class in modern program history. And, they beat out Notre Dame for Jalen Cooper, who you guys know how good he was in the state of Texas over his high school career. they signed Draymond Odoms, who 24/7 has as a 5-star. We have him in the top 50. Like, that's the type of level that they want to get at. They want to be multiple top 100 guys, multiple 4-stars, and then, win high level recruiting battles just across the board.
Flippin' Ty Hawkins was the one that was like a real big sign of like, here's the intent. Like, we're no longer backing down from these battles. How big was that one for SMU?
I think that was the statement that Rhett Lashley and his staff needed to make with regards to the 25 class, because you had Jalen Cooper, who I think had committed by that point or committed right around there, but he was already in the boat. It was just a matter of him announcing. But Ty Hawkins was one where SMU, had some ties. His sister went to SMU. They were the first program out of SMU and TCU to offer. They were on him early. And the one thing was they weren't in a power conference program. And they weren't a power conference program. And eventually that obviously changed. Then you saw the success, or they hadn't had the success yet, but they were in that power conference. And then they kind of flexed a little NIL muscle in that recruitment. And it's okay in today's day and age. So all of that really signaled, hey, like Sonny Dykes and SMU right now I don't think they're recruiting in the same kind of field. There's not many overlapping recruiting battles, and SMU won their fair share of the ones over the last couple of years that they've battled with them. But that was the big statement. That was the longtime TCU 4-star quarterback commit, and SMU just kept the press on, and they felt confident, and they got it done.
So Craven had a column that came out this week on TexasFootball.com, and I thought it was really interesting. Like, what is the third best job in the state right now? Because Texas and A&M, SDC, let's take them out of this. I see Craven smiling here. We know where this is going. Craven picked TCU. It's probably the third best job. Do you have a rebuttal to that, Billy?
I guess the rebuttal would be, I mean, even if I didn't cover SMU, didn't go there or whatever, you would see what success SMU has had now. And in today's day and age of college football, you would say, well, they're only just getting started. I was on campus this week and we were talking about, there's new grass, $3 million worth of new grass on the field for SMU. They went, from turf to grass. They're probably going to put in the new trendy LED lights, but somebody goes, oh, don't worry. I mean, they might have to wait on the lights because, all this is, and kind of pointing around the stadium, this is all going to look totally different in 4 to 5 years. Like, there's a master plan coming for that stadium that is, going to put it on the level of what a Baylor, a TCU, probably a Texas Tech has. And it will still fit SMU. It won't be this, ginormous thing, but that's kind of the last piece. And then you have rev share rolling, you have NIL, you have, as we know, boosters that are very, very committed. You have great coaches on campus. You just nabbed Damon Evans. This is your AD from Maryland. Jay Hartzell rolls in from Austin, and he's been just incredible.
That one hurt as a UT grad. That one hurt.
Yeah, I'm just, my phone, I had more text messages from UT people being like, when Jay Hartzell left, than SMU people being like, holy cow. So it's just, things are rolling. That they call it Mustang momentum, the new administration, and I mean they're going to unveil a new capital campaign, and I'm sure it's going to be over $2 billion goal. And just, I mean, this university and this program moving to the ACC is just at this point, it just seems like it's really rolling. So yeah,
I was
and I
like,
know you see it too. Yeah,
I was a whisker away from titling that like SMU's the next blue blood in college football. Like I totally see where SMU is headed. The thing that gave me pause was I'm just still not sure about the future of the ACC, and if the musical chairs thing starts working again, what is the guarantee that SMU isn't like left out again? If the Big 12 doesn't want them, or if the Super League happens. Behind the scenes, like just from what how comfortable are you that SMU is going to stay in that realm, in that stratosphere 5 years from now when conference realignment happens again?
I'm pretty confident, just because, one, you see the leadership that SMU has right now, and all of it, whether it be academically or athletically, is geared around making sure SMU is in the club that they're in now. And whatever club that looks like, they want to be inside the ropes with a bottle at the table, very Dallas style. Like, they want to be in there. And that's really the goal. So yeah, you can have a goal and it not work out, but I think recent history has shown they're going to make it work. And, the Big 12, with it being revamped, I would wonder if tomorrow the ACC imploded, if the Big 12 could take SMU and SMU give them the same deal because they had nowhere else to go. Hey, we're fine. We won't take TV money, whatever. Are you not taking that?
Yeah.
I mean, you've allowed this ACC group to kind of have a outpost here in Texas when the SEC has been allowed in, and truthfully, it's probably a little bit of immaturity on the Baylor, Houston, or not even Houston. Houston was helping SMU, but Baylor, TCU, Texas Tech for not letting SMU in.
That's fear.
There's fear. There's fear, and you see why, and you see the buzz around SMU, and at some point the Big 12 is going to have to find teams that are committed, that are really committed to doing this at a high level.
Yeah.
And it can't just be there are good programs, there are good universities. Texas Tech is rolling in investing. Baylor's been doing a good job, but you need like another flagship spender, I feel like, because that'll give you a good chance to have another, like you said, like maybe a blue blood, type of, like if SMU and Texas Tech ran the Big 12, would that be the worst thing in the world for the conference? Probably not.
Be great for Dave Campbell's.
Yeah.
Because I've been trying to think about this because it's the summer, and so I have all this time to think. I'm up till 3:00 in the morning with a crying baby, so I have a lot of time. I think the last program that really broke onto the scene was Clemson. Maybe Oregon, kind of around that way. I think there's an argument to be made that SMU could make that same type of, but that in 15 years, a whole generation doesn't even think of SMU as the death penalty team. Yeah. They think of them as just kind of the new kid, cool kid on the block that's got all the money.
Yeah, and in Dallas too. I mean, the only thing that you could argue is working against SMU, and I would imagine they'd find a way eventually. But they are kind of gridlocked a little bit as far as what they could do. I mean, if they needed to build a new stadium or do something like that, I don't know. I mean, that would be the only drawback, I guess, for them. But they've got the sweet indoor that, I mean, they probably spent $10 million on red brick alone on that thing. They don't put up erector sets on campus when they do things. It's all pretty high level stuff. So a lot of conferences, I think, value that, and SMU is nowhere close to joining the SEC or joining the Big Ten, but they have people that at least have conversations with them. Okay. And I think that kind of speaks to at least where they're able to play at this level because of the people that are running the show, the money involved, and all of that. And I would love to see more rivalries that are regional, and so the Big 12 makes the most sense from that. SMU is more like most of the ACC though, from a just school perspective. So
yeah.
So off the field, it's going great. On the field, it's going great. New grass, by the way, and then also college football playoff appearance last year. What is your confidence level that the offense, Kevin Jennings, will be similar to last year, even while losing Brashard Smith, who was sensational?
I think it's going to look pretty different. Is my gut. Okay. RJ Maryland's coming off his ACL. He should be back, ready to go. He's working out with the team. He's, I think, maybe a week away from being fully cleared to be cutting and doing, all of the things and go, full speed ahead. Matt Hibner emerged as one of the best tight ends in the conference for sure last year. And then they've got Jordan Hudson, Romello Brinson. They've got a handful of young pups at wide receiver that they're excited about as well. And then they really upgraded the offensive line. And I also think with Kevin, his experience, the ups and the downs are so important in this. And the time spent over this offseason as being the guy and knowing he's the guy, that could is the big qualifier there, but could lead him to, being able to take a little bit more of the role of leading the offense rather than, Brashard Smith was that dude out there that made play after play after play, and Kevin made them too. But, you had that running game that you knew was going to roll. They have options that they like at the running back position, and they seem like they've got enough talent where one of those guys will, end up being the hot guy. But I mean, Brashard was that special. So the general feeling I have is that I think just the way they play, I guess, or play calling, maybe like not maybe some personnel changes too. They might spend a little bit more time in 12. That might change, but this is still a team that is going to be pretty creative offensively. And now that Kevin's in that second year of being the guy, I think they know a little bit more about where to put him and the situations to put him in. And then Kevin's got to hold up his end of the deal and make sure he doesn't put himself in some of those situations that we saw late in the season that came back to bite him. So I have confidence in Kevin because I know just how he's built, how he's wired, and just, I think he wears a lot of what happened at the end of the season on his back. I mean, there's no question about it. But he's also a really mature kid or young man who's I think got a chance to really burst out onto the national stage now and do it at a high level.
It kind of almost feels like the success that he had and the team had almost works against him in the offseason because like he got to a place where none of these other quarterbacks got to, like a Sawyer Robertson, a Josh Hoover, a Baron Morton. But because he had a bad game against a really good Penn State offense, you see those other guys kind of mentioned above him. Do you think that he's kind of getting undersold as a player this offseason because of just how it ended?
Yeah, I think so. And I think as like an SMU, fans on our site, you get a little bit prisoner of the moment of Abdul Carter, Penn State, eating his lunch, for a little bit. But the context also was, man, they were going up and down the field on Penn State when all that was happening too. That's the crazy thing about that game, and the defense was playing well, but you can't do that against that good of a team and recover. You just can't. So it's definitely working against him. Anytime you see Kevin Jennings things on Twitter, it's but he just threw another pick against Penn State or something. Which is, I mean, when you get to that level of exposure to a national audience, that is how people are going to remember you. And when you're the quarterback, it overshadows all the other things that your team was doing that maybe could have led some people to believe that SMU should be preseason top 10 or preseason top 12. I think SMU just as a whole is probably getting a little undersold. They do have a lot of changes that are happening, from last year's team, but I mean, Kevin just was some of the things that we saw from him last year. None of the other quarterbacks in the state of Texas can do it, and I mean none of them.
Mm-hmm. I think my other big question I have for SMU is on that defensive line, which you talked about in your opening statement of like, they didn't go out and get the Tank Booker from Arkansas, but they've got Terry Webb from Texas State, who is a really good addition that maybe just doesn't come from as big of a logo of school. Like, what is your confidence level in this defensive line that it's going to be of similar production to how good it was last year?
That has been, like I said earlier, my biggest question on this defense. And I think there's two people that at SMU you could argue are the most consistent on the coaching staff, and it's Scott Simons and it's Calvin Thibodeau. I mean, they just have, and that's not a slight to any of the other coaches or whatever, but, because everybody's been good enough that they made the college football playoff. But those two guys have been able to get so much out of their units. Scott Simons calls a great defensive, game plan pretty consistently week in, week out. I mean, I think TCU is the team that had the most success pretty much all season against them, truthfully. And, some of that was just kind of how weird that game was as a whole. But Calvin Thibodeau takes guys like Tank Booker, who was cast off from Maryland, cast off from Arkansas, and was able to take them and turn them into consistent contributors. Jonathan Jefferson was lost behind, all those studs at Georgia. It's just a different level that they've been able to get more out of, quote unquote, less. But Terry Webb's an NFL type of athlete, from talking with their strength staff and seeing him in the spring. I mean, he does some freaky things. Jeffrey Emba he's like 6'7", 290 pounds and just moves so well. I mean, they have options. I just think maybe they're a little thinner like from an actual physical perspective than they were last year. And they have, in place of like a tank, a 350 pounder, they have some guys like an Akeel Washington. Akeel could probably stand up and play a little 5-tech. He could play, an end. He can be your, rush end. He can drop in coverage, play linebacker. Ja'Kiah Lang is an addition from Missouri. They like him long term. And they also return Isaiah Smith, Cam Robertson, and Billy Walton from, that last year's defensive end room. And so there's a lot of confidence on the edges, and then they'll figure out kind of the pecking order. One guy, they call him Shaq, Kavonte Spears, coming in from Memphis, has been totally under the radar. He's probably your version of Tank that isn't getting talked about enough, but he's a pretty freaky athlete from what I understand. So if they hit on the athletes, that'll help them, be able to adjust to that ACC level. When you get guys who aren't good athletes, even if they come from wherever they come from, that's where you can really get exposed. But I think they really hit athletically on a lot of these guys.
I'm trying to convince SMU to sell a subscription to listen to Scott Simons in the headset on Saturday game days. I just think that would be one of the more entertaining things in the history of the world. I love that guy.
You can, you can hear him from the press box seating.
I've always been fascinated. Like, you like listen to offensive coaches talk and it's like science, and you listen to like defensive coaches talk and it's like Vietnam, they're just under attack at all times. I just love the dichotomy of that thing.
I wrote a story about Scott Simons last year, and I think his opening quote was, "Calling plays for a game is 3.5 hours of gut-wrenching hell."
Yeah, so good. He didn't care to be in the video game. He was like, I never signed the paper. I think my agent's going to make me. Like, I absolutely love the way defensive coordinators are.
Yeah, exactly. He'll like, the world will be ending. That he's just a grizzled kind of defensive coordinator mindset. He's just like, I don't know if we're gonna, we got East Texas A&M and they got some pretty good players.
Right.
Okay, Coach Sales. So
you talked about the defensive line, and I agree with you. I think that they've brought in enough and they return enough to where I'm not all that worried about the defense. I mean, you lose Elijah Roberts, that's hard to replace, obviously. To me, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I'm more worried about the linebacker position. Like, what do you think happens at linebacker? Do you think Alexander Kilgore is like ready to come in and like be that guy?
Yeah, I mean, mentally he's ready. And last year, I mean, I think he finished with like 76 tackles and he didn't start. Yeah. So I mean, he's productive. He's always around the ball. I think he has a chip on his shoulder too. And he's not like chip on his shoulder like, man, everybody talks about Kobe Wilson and Ahmad Walker. I can't stand those guys. It's like I waited my turn, but because of those two guys, I'm just kind of here. That's the starting linebacker for SMU. Alex Kilgore is a dude. Like I think he's got a chance to have, an all ACC type of season. He got his feet wet in conference last year, so it shouldn't be too much of an adjustment to having that big key role and being in the middle. Question is what does this linebacker group look like for Maurice Crum Jr.? And we talked with him this week, and he was like, I think it's going to probably be more of playing 5, 6, 7 guys, and we'll have a Kilgore who's your starter most snaps, but we'll also have a Zakai Barker who they brought in from East Carolina. So Ahmad Walker and Kobe Wilson under 6 feet, group of 5 from Georgia, transferred to SMU, and they both end up being 2 lights out football players. Zakai Barker under 6 feet from Georgia, transfer from East Carolina. I'm like, do you just like filter all of this on a sheet?
He's got a type.
Yeah, he's got a type. But they're really excited about him, and they think he's really mature. One tidbit on him: when he came on his visit, I guess he took like pages and pages and pages of notes. Like every meeting, didn't matter, coach, nutritionist, whatever. So he's wired the right way. And then they bring in Kyle Firm, who's a pretty good athlete from JUCO. They have Justin Medlock back. They have a lot of different pieces that could step up into bigger roles this year for SMU. And if that happens, the goal is that obviously they'll be, quote unquote, good enough. Brandon Maizono is another one that they'll be able to, just be productive and be solid. And then I think the goal would be, like, realistically, that they're hitting their stride going into conference play. And they've settled in on a rotation. They know what they're going to get. If they need to tweak things as far as how they do things, they can do all of that. So that's I agree with you, though. The linebacker room is probably the one that has the most questions, because you just don't know enough outside of about Kilgore, like what you're going to have out of that room.
You mentioned that non-conference slate, well, getting ready before conference play. I feel like SMU has got sneaky one of the best schedules in the state. I mean, Baylor off the rip is awesome. Then you Clemson and Miami this year in the ACC.
And Louisville.
I mean, what do you like? Yeah, and Louisville. Like, what do you think about this schedule? How does it break for them?
So here's the hard. Obviously, the hard part is we have no idea. Everybody's just kind of guessing or whatever at this point.
The hard part's Clemson and Miami. Yes,
for ACC. But look, Baylor and TCU are two huge games for all three programs.
Yeah,
I mean, we know what it means in state. We know what it could mean in recruiting. We know it's the last one between SMU, TCU, all the things. And at the same time, has zero bearing on how they do in conference play and where their season could end up. If they end up being in, the ACC championship game, they could have lost to Baylor and TCU at the same time. I mean, but the good thing for SMU is they played really well at home over the past, several years. And you get Louisville, Miami at home. You get Stanford at home, which could be improved and all of that. But you really have a schedule that I think outside of that Clemson game is you should feel pretty good about it overall. And I mean, if you're able to pick up kind of where you left off, like Baylor and TCU didn't knock the doors off anyone. They really finished well. But if all things are kind of still going in the right direction, SMU should take care of business against both, in theory. Mm-hmm. And that's where it gets hard to predict, because Baylor's going to be good. I think TCU is going to be good, but SMU is going to be good too. And I think Baylor's probably out of the three programs getting, I would say, the most national love right now. I mean, you could argue. I don't know if they're included in as many top 25 things, but I think Sawyer Robertson's getting a significantly more amount of buzz around him, and people are picking Baylor, kind of be a trendier pick. That's just my viewpoint of it. So
I think I started that.
Game's at home, like, what'd you say?
I said, I think I started that.
I was back. When did Sawyer come out of high school? And was it 2020, 2021?
Yeah, I think it was a COVID year. Yeah.
Yeah. I was leading the charge on like Sawyer Robertson is better than what he's being recruited as. Like, I think he threw for LSU maybe, and they ended up not recruiting him, if I have my time during COVID right and all of that. But I was always super high on him. So for him to pan out the way he is, I'm pretty pumped, just as, somebody who at least likes to try and get my thoughts on football players, right? So he's a really good football player. And I remember Josh Hoover coming out of high school. I mean, SMU really wanted him, and he ends up going to Indiana. SMU didn't have space for him when he was coming back from Indiana. So, it's going to be interesting to see.
Before we let you get out of here, with that schedule you were talking about, I think it's possible that this SMU team is better than last year, but doesn't finish in a way that illustrates that. What do you think is success? How do you define success in 2025 on the football field?
I think you got to win 10 games to have a successful season with where the expectations are, with what you have returning. That's success. But what that looks like, it could be all over the place. I mean, they could lose to Baylor and TCU, and then they could run through the ACC. I mean, Louisville went on the road and won at Clemson. SMU's now had experience in big environments, so they should be more prepared for that, for what's going to end up coming in Death Valley. Doesn't mean they'll win, but I just think they learned so much from last year that they'll have an opportunity to win 10 games this year and make it happen. There might be some growing pains early in the season, especially maybe defensively and figuring out that running back rotation. But if they can get all that settled, I mean, think about last year. SMU blew up their entire starting offensive line after game one, completely revamped it, obviously made the quarterback change, and they were rotating, I think 3 or 4 running backs with Brashard Smith, before he ended up really they just said, all right, no one else touches the ball. Like in my opinion, they really found their identity. They honed in on it on both sides of the ball, and then they went on their tear. I mean, I think that Louisville win was their best win of last year. Going on the road, I mean, that's a good Louisville team. They had pros on. Isaac Brown's unbelievable. And then they broke Pitt. I mean, that win, they don't get enough credit for that win because they broke them. They were undefeated. They were on a roll. And then they lost every single one of their games and the year after that, which was wild. And they trailed for like maybe a few minutes in ACC play. Yeah. So all that experience coming back, it's a good situation for SMU to have success again. I would say success is 10 wins. You'd like to get to Charlotte when you do it. So however that looks, I mean, get to Charlotte and, that would be ideal. But the success is 10 wins. If you get back to that 10-win mark, I mean, that's a successful year no matter how it looks. But if they start 4-0 and then, lose 2 ACC games, that'd be successful.
Yeah, I mean, they went on the road and beat New Orleans Saints starting quarterback.
Yeah, right. Who's starting for the Saints?
It's going to be Tyler Shuck, I think.
Okay, all right, yeah.
Still one of the craziest glow-ups in the history of the world, but anyway.
Yeah. So.
Well, the road to Charlotte starts now, and Billy Embody's got you covered for all of it. Billy, thank you for joining us to preview SMU's 2025 season. We'll see you down the line, my friend.
Of course. Let's tag some Baylor and TCU people. Let's get them in the comments on this. I'm sure it'll be lively.
Yeah. I'll be there week 2, so I'll holler at you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.